Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Been a while since I've posted anything. Had a lot to do personally and work-wise. And wintertime set in. It's really cold. I can't do much body work and painting in this weather. Today it's like the high of 20 up here in East Tennessee. Luckily I am in my shop and I do have heat, so I pardon the noise when it turns on and off. But what I'm working on is looking at the cooling system on this swap in Nelson, and I want to retain the air conditioning. So just an all-season cruiser. And so what I did, I was looking at some swap things where you had to really buy some special parts to make all this work and fit in the S10 or Blazer. And I came up with a couple of things that might help you. First of all, I bought a radiator, an S10 Swap Radiator. This is from Black Horse Racing, and I'll put the part number there for it. But this is made for the S10 conversion swap to a V8. Now I did not get a specific LS radiator where the inlet and outlet are on the same side. I went with the traditional small block, big block Chevy style radiator because I'll show in a moment. I'm using the Corvette style water pump, which puts the water outlet from the pump over on the driver's side of the engine closer to this connector here. So that being said, I went ahead and was just laying out how I can mount this, and I want to show you everything I've done so that if you do attempt this, this is pretty easy once you get everything measured out and laid out. Now what I bought here is a universal fit 12 by 25 condenser. I'll put a part number, show that so you can help you find that. And when you go to mount this up, just remember that your large fitting is at the top. Because that's where the gas goes in and then it condenses into a liquid coming out the bottom, smaller fitting. So just remember that. So anyway, I got that, and I wanted to put electric fans in, but I wanted this thing to look really clean, really neat, and I was wondering if there was a way to mount the fans in between the condenser and the radiator without really hacking everything up and still have plenty of room at the engine. So I did come up with that, and luckily I had the foresight to use the Corvette mounting stuff on the engine, and that puts everything back, all the accessories back about 1.5 inches as opposed to where the truck stuff would be. Now you can also do an F-body type mount, which makes it 3/4 inch back further than the truck, but I went with the Corvette stuff just so I could have the most room possible. And I got a couple of electric fans. These are just Mostplus off Amazon, but they had really good ratings. They had a 4.5 star out of 5 rating with 969 positive ratings on using these. So I went ahead with that, and what I had to do was went ahead and designed a bracket for the fans that would also mount to the condenser. And one of the tools that I bought, you can see I've got some rivet nuts in here, and I'm using all stainless steel rivet nuts. And if you don't have familiarity with rivet nuts, these things are cool. If you've ever tried to work with sheet metal or thinner materials and you know, you want to put a nylock nut or something on the back, but you've got to hold it in order to get things tight. This is the answer to that, and I'll show you how easy these are. I'll move this out of the way. So basically, I'll show you why I'm putting these in here. We've got a rivet nut, and I'm using all the 3/4 or the stainless steel, and these are 832. And I bought just a rivet nut setter from Amazon. It wasn't a whole lot, but basically what you want to do is, with it fully drawn and closed, you want to screw the rivet nut on there. And then this one has like a gauge that moves according to the material thickness that you want. And on this one, 2.5 to 3 millimeter thickness. So we're going to set this a little bit light. There's no need to really draw these so tight because you will snap the arbor off the smaller ones, and I did that. I had to get a replacement, but after playing around with it for a while, so there, with it just about to squeeze it, I'm at about 2.5 millimeter, and basically all you do is set it in there and give it a squeeze, and that's it. Unscrew it here with the little handle, and then you have a permanent mounted nut riveted in to your material. They won't fall out, super strong, and so that works out really well. Now the reason I did this, to mount the fans on this plate, this side, the back side, is going to be toward the condenser. And then we take our fans, and I'm using these 4 mounting areas here, and we just set those over our rivet nuts. Now if you'll notice, the nut is still higher than the plastic is, so I got these little nylon spacers, and we put those on here. And then I'll use a 832 by 1/2 stainless steel screw, and with a washer, flat washer, and basically that just screws that down nice and tight. And what this does, it makes this thing serviceable, that if I ever have a problem with these fans, I can simply move the radiator without having to disconnect AC hoses or anything like that, and get to these fans for replacement. And I can do all that without having to dismount anything else, the grill or anything like that, in the front of the vehicle. Now we're just putting this together right now just for purposes of showing you how it is. I will go back and put a little drop of blue Loctite on these, just so I'm safe and secure and knowing they won't drop out under vibration. So we'll get our other fan over here and do the same thing. Alright, so those are nice and secure, and I'm going to set this aside, bring the condenser back over. Now there again, I'm going to put the large fitting at the top, and my fans, I want the wiring to come out of the top. And and we'll get ready to put those in. Now what I wanted to do was space this out a little bit in order for these fans to have a chance to draw from all over the condenser when they draw through. And these are puller style fans. So what I did is I made a couple of plastic strips, and these are counterboard with just like a bullet bit to get over the heads of the rivet nuts that I put in here. And then we should be able to just simply put some more screws into. Probably have to go to a longer screw because of the spacing, so we'll use a 3/4 inch long. Now on the top side, to aid in the mounting to a strip to mount to the radiator core support, I'm going to use some long screws all the way through that will kind of serve a dual function. Alright, I kind of pre-fit things and came up with some mountings, some little spacer brackets to mount to the core support. You'll have to cut those out. These are out of 1/8 inch thick aluminum. I just painted them black real quick, and we've got rivet nuts here that they'll screw into, but we have now the stud coming from the other side, and I want to drop a washer on here just to keep the spacing the same. We might as well drop them on the front, just, or the top side, just because we're there. Okay, this double-stepped one here, it needs to go on there to clear the area for the fitting to attach. Then we can use our 832 by 3/4 screws here. And again, I'm using all stainless steel fasteners. They're not that much more than regular steel, but I just like the increased corrosion resistance there. Now what we can do for the studs is just go ahead and drop another washer on, and then we'll use an 832 nylock nut. Definitely not the right tool for this, but I can't find my wrench right now. So we'll just snug them up. And so this is the bottom side. Now we need the top side, and I made this bar with the rivet nuts in it, and this will go up into the core support and attach to a top underside lip there, and I'll show you that in just a moment. About to forget the washers. Yeah, it's a little bit of work. It was a lot of thinking to pre-plan and do a lot of measuring and a little bit of fabricating, but I kind of like how it turned out. And you don't really have to hack up a lot of your automobile to get it to work. All right. So I'll get this off of here, be back in just a moment, and we'll set the core support up here and show you how that fits in and what I had to do to modify the core support to accept this. It's not much. Alright, so there's the core support. I went ahead and painted that with Rust-Oleum's Fusion Gloss Black. That stuff really covers well, sticks well, lays out flat. And what I had to do, I cut this section out that was right in here. The old core support, or I mean the old condenser, mounted on the inside here and really took up some room on the inside. And I know there's a hood release bracket that bolts on, and so it mounts to the surface there, and it extends on into the condenser area a little bit here. And I didn't want to have to modify that or buy one that has been redesigned in this area that you can get, but it's quite expensive with their kit. Their condenser and kit comes with the bracket, and it puts it out here a little bit to give you access for insetting the radiator into the core support. I didn't really want to go that route, so I came up with this instead. Minimal cutting. I did have to notch out here for the 90-degree fittings for the AC lines coming off the condenser, and I transferred some holes inside this inner lip from the back and drilled those. The condenser itself, the assembly with the fans and everything, will sit right in there. So once I put screws in from the inside into these rivet nuts that I've already put in there, and then I've got screws and nuts to go on the inside on the bottom edge, you can see that the hood latch mount will mount right back on there without any modification. Alright, we've got all our hardware installed to mount the condenser and fans in, and I want to show you what I did for the radiator mount. I created a mounting bar here with some rubber isolation mounts. These are 6mm by 15mm thick. And I mounted them to this bar, and then the bar I mounted to the core support, and again I used the rivet nuts in there and got that, and then I made sure I had the same distance overall depth wise, and mounted a piece of aluminum angle here again with 5 more of the rubber isolation mounts. And I modified the radiator a little bit to accept this mounting. Yeah, basically I measured out and marked a series of holes here so that these studs, these threaded studs, can go through there and then I can get nuts and lock washers back on the inside of 10 locations. So we have a kind of a rubber isolated mount there. Since we're not going to have the core support underneath, I had actually cut those off to clean that up. We don't have the studs that stick out of like the stock radiator that go down into a rubber bushing here, and then a top cap that comes over and retains the top. So I modified it that way. And on this radiator also, I took the straight fitting out for the overflow tank and tapped it to 1/8 inch pipe so I could get a 90-degree elbow in there and keep everything trimmed down. This fitting here, that's for my steam port coming off of the LS motor, and I tapped it with an 1/8 inch pipe tap, and also cut the head off a little bit because it was for a big push-on hose. Now this radiator came with the integrated transcooler, which is basically a tube that goes inside this cavity, and I blocked that off with dropped a couple of O-rings in there, and then put some flattened off 1/2 inch 20 thread set screws in there. That's what thread that is in these ports, 1/2 inch 20. And then the last modification I did, this radiator came with a little plastic drain plug that I have read they don't seal real well, they keep falling out, and it's kind of chintzy, so I replaced that. I've got one coming. It's a real brass petcock, and I just ran a 1/4 inch pipe tap in that hole and gave it a little taper because I think it was a straight thread, but I gave it the taper so I can screw in that brass petcock, which seals really well. So that's all I did to modify the radiator. I also put in some rivet nuts in the original mounting holes that it came with, so that I can make a nice cover that goes up and over the core support and attaches, and then I can fill this area with a piece of foam to seal off the air gap, and I'll show you what that looks like in a minute, the air gap anyway. And I did that on the top and bottom. So let's set this aside and I'll lay down the core support. And if you notice, the radiator is going to sit basically on the surface of these. So if we take a straight edge and we lay it across this, you can see there's ample clearance to the fans not hitting anything over there. Plenty of room. There's actually an additional 1/4 inch of space there. These fans are 2 1/4 inches thick, so you could go to a 2 1/2, or you could simply just space the radiator up just a little bit more. So let's set the radiator on there. We'll see what it looks like as an assembly. And I'll just throw a couple of nuts on here temporarily. Alright, so now that our radiator is mounted, again, when I make a nice pretty cap for this, I'll put a piece of foam in here to seal off that air gap. And also, now that I've got that mounted, I can measure in between this original mounting surface for the condenser and the radiator and make a filler panel in there with a foam seal against the radiator that will in effect turn this entire center area into a shroud and force all of the air to come through the condenser and then through the radiator with almost no leakage otherwise. So pretty efficient. We have a good gap, so let me set this on the frame and we'll look at engine clearance. So I'll be right back. Alright, we're back. We've got the core supports set at the body mounts in the approximate location they go in, and it's set in there nice and flat. I do have a little rag in here because it is heavy and tends to fall back, and just space that out. But you can see we've got some pretty good clearance in there now. We don't have to mess with fans inside here. It's all nice and tucked in there, and we've got good room to access anything we need to in there. Probably have to get creative with finding a radiator hose for the top. And on the bottom, I've got a 90-degree outlet coming, and then I'll have a little rubber 90 hose here going to it. So that will solve that issue and make a real clean installation. Can get to our radiator cap real good without having to notch out the core support here, and very little modification to the core support itself. All of the clip locations fit for the grill. Didn't have to modify any of that. The headlight mounts were fine. And on this setup here, I do have a 4-inch to 3-inch silicone 90 adapter, and I'm going to run the air inlet tube right through this area and down into a cold air box that I will fabricate over here. And this is where the battery used to be in the stock location, and I am either going to relocate that to the back or put it on the driver's side near where all the electrical is anyway. The only thing I've got to do is run a heavy gauge lead over to the starter for its power. But other than that, it's a pretty clean installation, and everything hidden. If I do need to service the fans one day, I can simply drain the radiator, pull it out, and have access to take the fans out from this side without having to disturb anything in the front. Don't have to take the grill off, don't have to take the condenser back out. That's all permanently mounted and doesn't need to be coming out for service. So I think that's a good solution. I hope it helps you if you're doing this kind of a swap. I took a lot of research time on this, a lot of measurements, and came up with this plan. Fairly simple installation. Had to look for the right parts to adapt with. Definitely the rivet nut tool was a godsend. Those things are great. So highly recommend you getting one of those. Very, very useful. We'll be back with another video showing you how I solved the AC hose issue, because now we've got a mix of metric and standard fittings. We did change the AC compressor to something other than stock, so I can't use the stock lines, but I did a lot of research over the last month or so and found the right fittings, the right hose, and I'm going to show how to make the hoses. And so that's coming up in the next video. We'll go through that. I'll give you part numbers and a place where you can buy fittings if you're still wanting to keep your AC system and go to this type of a swap. So thanks for joining me, and hope this was informative, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, be well, and thanks again for watching.